Started and all right. So once again, welcome everyone to the Clear Admit MBA application overview. I'm Graham Richmond. I'm the co-founder of Clear Admit. I'm going to moderate this session. That's probably all you really need to know about me. I'm going to try to stay out of the way and just try to extract as much great information as possible from our panelists, who I'd love to introduce now. So first up, we have Allison Jameson, who's the Assistant Dean of Admissions at Duke's Fuqua School of Business. Hi, Allison.
Hi, Graham. Happy to be here today and glad to see some Durhamites chiming in on the chat there. So really happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, it's always a pleasure. Great to have you back. Next up, we've got Kathleen Edwards, who's the Director of Graduate Admissions at Emory Goizueta Business School. Hey, Kathleen.
Hi, and that is me. I do change my hair color every once in a while, so keep you on your toes, but nice to be here.
Excellent. Yeah, welcome. We're really thrilled to have you. Next up, we've got Lika Hertz, who's the Associate Director of Admissions and Student Recruitment at UNC's Kenan-Flagler School of Business. Hey, Lika.
Hello, great to be here and nice to see cities from all over the world. That's great.
Yeah, there must be some Chapel Hill too to counter that Durham stuff, right?
Yeah, so many Durham. I live in Durham, so I accept that as well.
We'll take the whole triangle if that's acceptable, right? So, all right. And then last but not least, I wanted to introduce Patrick Olson, who's the Senior MBA Recruitment and Admissions Officer at the University of Texas at Austin's McCombs School of Business. Hi, Patrick.
Hi, everyone. Greetings from Texas. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. So what we're going to do is we first have kind of a couple of just sort of roundtable questions that we're going to go through. And then we have some questions that are going to be that we actually got collected from attendees to these events that we do. And we're also going to learn a little bit about your application requirements. So there's a lot to cover today, but I wanted to just start with a very basic question. And we'll throw this one to Allison first from Fuqua. And that is, what would you identify as your MBA program's core values, and how do these values inform the way that your team approaches the admissions process?
Yeah, I think that this is, there's a phrase that you may have heard of if you've looked at Duke at any point in your MBA journey, and it's this idea of Team Fuqua. That is sort of our identification tag that we use for ourselves, and it is so much more than a marketing slogan. It really is who we are here. And the idea behind Team Fuqua is that everyone is supporting everyone else while advancing themselves. So we are all moving together as a team. And I think the way that we have, that our Dean, Bill Bolding, has really articulated this is that there are three things we're looking for in our students: IQ, EQ, and DQ. And IQ, obviously, people are familiar with. It's are you ready? Do you have the academic readiness to handle the rigor of the program? The emotional intelligence, are you able to empathize with others? Are you able to anticipate the needs of others? And then DQ, we think, is really what sets the culture apart. And this is what we call the decency quotient. And we are looking for students who are looking to use business as a force for good in the world, those who are looking to help others advance with them. It really puts the idea of Team Fuqua, I think, into a broader term. This idea of is this somebody that you want to spend your time with and who's going to make the others around them better? And the way that those sort of core values inform what we do in the admissions process is we're going to be looking for those characteristics. We're going to be looking through, and it's going to come through your essays. It will come through in the interview, in your recommendation, in your career progression. Are you someone who actively participates in the communities that you are a part of, whether that's at work, at school, in your personal life? Are you seeking to make changes? Do you have the fortitude to choose the harder right over the easier wrong? And do you bring that sort of compass with you to business school? So we will look for that. And we look for that in not just what have you accomplished, but in the who are you part of the application, which for us really comes through in the essays and the 25 things essays that we ask, which is something that we'll talk about, I think, a little bit later. But I think that's what I would identify for Fuqua.
Okay, excellent. Super helpful. And I love the way that those different values, they map to so many different areas of the application. So really interesting. Next up, I wanted to ask the same question to Kathleen. Kathleen, what are your thoughts on this?
Sure. Well, it's actually fortunate that we have 7 core values that we make our decisions by, both on a macro level as well as a micro level in our day-to-day school decisions. So These 7 core values, I won't list them all for you, but courage, integrity, diversity, team, community, and rigor, and others are really distilled from the philosophy of Roberto C. Goizueta, our namesake, who was the former CEO and president of Coca-Cola. So we're trying to continue his legacy of people-focused leadership, triple bottom line awareness, those sorts of things, and really building, similar to Fuqua's message of building your own success along with your colleagues and your classmates and your whole community. So we always share these core values in our info sessions, in our application process, the whole way through for you, so that you can think about how your core values align with Goizueta's, how we can overlap and work together for your future success and continuing to develop your individual strength of character, your successes, your toolkit, all those sorts of things that will serve you not only in the day-to-day workplace right after business school, but for the long term as well. So those are 7 core values. They're listed frequently on the website, in our sessions, on our application questions. So it's something certainly for you to think about individually, which of those resonates with you, and how you can use those in each of our schools' core values to make a decision in terms of the best fit and the best community for yourself for the next few years and for your long-term affiliation with your business school.
Excellent. Yeah. And I was going to say, I mean, part of the reason we asked this question is I think it's kind of it's just a good admissions tip for anyone considering applying to these programs or really any business school to look at, what is the school talking about in terms of what matters to it and what are the kind of core values. And that's why we're trying to draw attention to this, because I do think that as you just described, you're looking at these things as you go through the file. And, it's just really important for candidates to kind of be aware, because although, I mean, all of you are, representing fantastic MBA programs, each program is different. And it's important to kind of, for candidates to perceive that. Lika, let's turn to you and hear a little bit about Kenan-Flagler. What are the core values there? And yeah, how do you guys, take those values into the admissions process?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have what we call the 4 I's. So it's impact, integrity, inclusion, and innovation. And so I like to say that our process is designed to open doors, not close doors, right? We want to bring in people. And so we utilize an approach that really emphasizes bringing diverse voices into the program. And we seek students who want to make an impact in the world as future business leaders. And so these 4 values are things that we expect students to embody, and it's something that we're looking at through the application process. But they're also not specific to just students. These are values that, that faculty are expected to uphold. These are values that we consider in our review process. We want to make sure that we're being innovative in our processes as things are changing. Of course, we want to ensure that we're being inclusive of the people who are applying to our program, and we ourselves are looking to make an impact. So we might ask questions in the interview process about maybe how you align with these values, not expecting you to memorize them before coming into that, but this is a major part of the community that we are hoping to build at Kenan-Flagler.
Got it. Okay. That's really helpful. Patrick, you've been patient. Tell us a little bit about values at McCombs and yeah, again, how they impact the way your team reads.
Absolutely. Like other schools, we have a list of our values. You can find them on our website. And I think those are the values that we're looking for, and specifically in the admissions process in our video essays. And so we ask people to submit pre-recorded video responses to questions, and all those questions come back to a core value. So come back to ambition, collaboration, community, motivation, and you'll notice all the questions are based off those values. So we make sure the application and the videos are reflective of what we're looking for in an applicant in the MBA space. And then I'll just say, as while we are McCombs MBA, we're also part of the University of Texas at Austin. And here at UT, we strongly believe in what starts here changes the world. And we want our students to come here into this program with a mindset of changing the world when they leave. And so we take that greater university motto to heart as well, and looking for game changers, people who are going to change the space and aren't afraid to think differently. And we incorporate that into, when we're reviewing applications as well.
Got it. It's great to know that those, interview questions are tied to the values. And again, just underlines the fact that people need to do their homework and read what you guys all say on your websites and sort of incorporate that as they begin the application process. I did want to just remind everyone who's joined us today, again, welcome. I know there's some folks who've come on a little bit late, and I just wanted to say that at the end of this session, at the end of the main session, each of our panelists is going to break off into an individual Zoom where you can go and hang out, ask them questions about their program. So stay tuned. We'll get you links to their individual Zoom rooms at the end, but just wanted to mention that for everyone who's joined us. Let's get into the next section, which is really just about kind of the application components. And I know, every school differs here a little bit, but what we've got on screen here are just some of the basic components that a lot of you will have in your application, a form to fill out. People have to send in their transcripts. Usually there's a standardized test. In some cases, there are waivers, a resume, essay or essays or short answers, recommendations. All the things you see on this list are typically a part of an MBA application. But what I wanted to do is get into a little bit of detail with each of you and talk about your process. And so we, basically, as you just saw on the prior slide, like the application requirements are quite similar from school to school. But we wanted to find out, like, what is it about your school's process that you want to call attention to, something different? And so we should have kind of a slide here. I guess we're going to start again with Allison, a slide that sort of has the items that made up your application process this past season. I recognize that we're now starting the new admission cycle. Things may change. Feel free to alert us to anything that you maybe already know is changing, or that, anything you want to unveil is more than welcome. But also, I know that you were going to talk maybe about one of your essay questions. And I did want to note, we have a couple of things on the list here, like your interview open period versus invitation, and then your early action round. Those are two things that jumped out at us as being kind of a little different. So anyway, I'll let you have the floor, but yeah, walk us through whatever you want about your process.
Yeah, no, I think you hit right on it, Graham. I think the things that they're different school to school and that can require a little explanation for Fuqua. One is, so we do have an early action round of admission. That is our first round. It's typically the first week in September. It's a binding decision round. So that is, you are saying that if you apply in that round and you are admitted, that you will come to Fuqua. So that is the round for those who have already done their research and they know Fuqua is the place that I want to be. You're saying if you're admitted, you'll withdraw applications from any other programs. So that is our binding round. The criteria for admission are not different during that time. And then for our interview period, we do have sort of a hybrid approach. So we have a period of time called the open interview period, where anyone can schedule an interview for their application. You do not have to wait. You do not have to have submitted your application. You schedule it and you have an interview with either an alum or one of our current students. It is your one and only official admissions interview, so you want to be sure that you are prepared for it. But it gives you the option of taking away some of the uncertainty and seeing, okay, I know I'm going to have an interview and this is the day that I'm going to do it. They are offered either virtually or in person on our campus in Durham, North Carolina. If you do not interview during that open period, then it would be by invitation. So you would submit your application, have your application reviewed, and await an invitation to interview. And we are going to continue to offer interviews either virtually or in person, again, depending on what works best for you. So I think those are two very logistical specific things to Fuqua. And then the one thing that I would say, I sort of referenced, and I'll just talk about it briefly, is our 25 things essay. That is one of our long essays, and we ask you to tell us 25 things about yourself. And this is where we are looking to go, beyond professional achievements. It may be included in there, but who are you? What makes you tick? What happened in your childhood? What happened to you last week that is unique and different and has shaped who you are? And this is how we really get a sense of what it might be like to have you in our community here. I do not anticipate this question changing. In fact, I can tell you, won't change. We've had it for a long time now and everybody loves it. So that will definitely be there. And to your other question, Graham, I don't anticipate there being any major changes. The second long essay could potentially be tweaked. We haven't actually made that decision yet. But if you're looking to start planning now, you can start working on your 25 things list. Incredibly entertaining and very insightful on how we get to know people. And then the last thing I will just mention is we do accept either the GMAT, the GRE, or the executive assessment with no preference for the test, whichever one works best for you.
Okay, terrific. And I'm going to just, I don't know if you mind, but the backstory on that 25 things essay is fantastic in that it used to be something that people on the admissions team had to fill out when they joined the team to get to know their colleagues,
Exactly.
right? And then you
Exactly.
guys realized it was so great that you decided, why don't we use this for people applying to Fuqua? So,
Exactly. Yeah. We
yeah,
still do it to this day with new hires, and it helps you get to know people really well and fast,
yeah.
and it's fun.
Definitely. So I see we're getting some questions in the chat. And I just want to remind everyone, you can save your questions and ask them of schools in the individual breakouts at the end. Because we'll, obviously we have a lot to get through in this main part of the session. But yeah, please hold your questions and schools will happily answer them in the individual breakouts. Let's move on. And Kathleen, let's talk a little bit about the process at Goizueta. Again, we have this list on the screen of like the items that made up your application process last season. I don't know if a lot of that's changing or if there's anything that you wanted to kind of highlight in terms of something that's different or that you want to call our attention to.
Sure, we review the application process every summer for user experience as well as for essay questions, tweaking them to make sure that we're getting the information from our candidates that will help us make informed decisions, those sorts of things. I don't anticipate any major changes. We are going to continue to offer a standardized test waiver application process, which is detailed on the website. So we require the GMAT, the GRE, or the MCAT or the LSAT. I wouldn't go out and take those if you haven't already, but if you're applying as a JD or MD, MBA. But we do have a waiver application process that will continue. Our essays, we may tweak the wording slightly, but most likely they will stay pretty similar. And we will update our randomized video essay questions, which is kind of our favorite part of the review process, where we get to kind of meet every applicant, hear a little bit something fun about themselves. It's they're kind of small talk, cocktail party kind of questions where if you're meeting someone for the first time and getting to know them. And so we really enjoy listening to those. We do typically offer an open interview period before round one, similar to Fuqua, and that will be detailed in our website, but we just don't publicize those dates because it's a fairly short window, but we will notify people, prospects via email. So if you're at all interested, definitely get on our email list. And also sometimes we'll have open interviews based on specific events, like our event weekends that candidates apply to attend, those sorts of things. So, but yes, pretty straightforward process. We feel we get to know you well through all of these different components. We know it's a lot of work that goes into your application. We really do read all of it. I promise. My eyes have lost vision from reading a lot of these, but we really do enjoy reading every single application and essay and watching your video essays.
Excellent. Now, just if I could clarify with you, the video essay portion, that's something that, so as they are filling out the application, once they've submitted or something, they get, or maybe as a part of that submission, there's an online process by which they're asked a question by the computer, I guess, and they record a little response to it and then upload it.
Correct. It's built into the application system. So all the details are there. And the instructions for how to make sure your webcam is working. You get to do a test run. And then you get served up a prompt question. And you have, I believe, 30 seconds to think about it and then 60 seconds to record your answer. If it doesn't go well or you don't like the question, you can pass and go to the second one. And then the third one is your last option. If you go to the third prompt, then you've got to answer that one. But they're all meant to be pretty easy to answer off the top of your head and good insight into your personality. And what's great about them is that we get to meet you through that video essay, even so every single candidate is met by the reader. And then that's in addition to the interview. So it's kind of multiple people are meeting you through the application process.
Excellent. Thanks for clarifying that and indulging me with that follow-up question. It's funny because last week we did a similar panel and I believe it was London Business School has a similar video component and they said the exact same thing about how it's really a nice way for the team to at least kind of quote get to meet each candidate, which ordinarily if it's an interview by invitation or something, they may not meet everyone in the same way. So it's a really useful tool. All right, let's move on. Lika, do you want to talk to us a little bit about the process at UNC Kenan-Flagler?
Yes, absolutely. So I will say not anticipating any big changes for the 2024 cycle. So what is listed on the on the screen here is all correct and accurate based on this year and likely next year. But a couple of things to highlight and maybe some inside knowledge. One thing to highlight is similar to what Kathleen said about Emory. We do offer some GMAT and GRE waivers. This is a waiver request process through the application. So you can't request a waiver until the application opens, but we do award a lot of waivers based on robust quantitative academic and professional backgrounds, understanding that there are other ways to demonstrate the academic prowess outside of a standardized test score. And then just a couple of other sort of highlights or hopefuls, as we are hoping to bring back some in-person interviews next year. There will always be the opportunity to interview virtually, and we will never have a preference of if you come to campus to interview or if you do it virtually. But we love meeting people, and so we're hoping, we haven't done this since 2019, but hoping to have some in-person interview opportunities. We did do some on-site interviews in various cities in the US this spring, and it was so great. And we want to continue to do that. And then the last thing that I'll mention is maybe something that could be unique. Not every business school does things the exact same way. But speaking of our interviews, I would say that it's important to note that our interviews are not blind. Our interviewers are not going in without any information about your application. They actually have access to the entirety of the application and are expected to at least to have reviewed your resume and your essays prior to talking to you so that they can be informed in the conversation. So that's something to think about if you are invited to an interview with Kenan-Flagler.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks for highlighting that, because I know that, for those joining today, you're probably a little ways off from, getting ready for an interview at a business school. But at the same time, I think Lika's making a really important point, which is it's so critical that you understand what the person interviewing you knows. Is this, as she said, a blind interview where the person doesn't know anything about you? You're like handing them your resume and just going over your background as sort of a first take. Or has this person done a deep dive into your background in the case of UNC here and read, your entire file, or at least the resume, essays, et cetera. So that's important to know, and appreciate you highlighting that, Lika. Patrick, let's talk a little bit about McCombs and your process. Yeah, just be good to know. I don't know if you're going to unveil any. I know last year you unveiled some some changes. I don't know if things are staying the same this year, but here are the components from the past season.
Yeah, I think last year we did a pretty big shift in our process. You notice here we don't have the word interview on our slide. We are really intentional about making sure that every person who applies to Texas McCombs goes through the same exact process and is treated the same exact way. We really want to make sure there's a fair and accessible and equitable process for our admissions timeline. So we don't have an interview. What we do instead is we ask the same questions we would ask in an interview in the form of a video assessment. So any question we would have asked in the interview is pre-recorded by myself or someone on my team. And then those questions are sent to you. And then, like you've heard before, you review the question, you have 30 seconds to think of your answer, and then you respond. The big difference is you can't redo ours. Your response is what it is, and then you move on to the next question. And every single person who completes an application will have the opportunity to do that video assessment. We recognize there is a important piece missing from the application, from the interview, with just video assessments, that human connection, that one-on-one. And we want to make sure that's still an option. And so we have what we call now admissions connections, and they're completely optional, but this is what students think of as an interview, but there's no evaluative piece to it. It is your chance as an applicant to connect with one of our students and for you to get to pick the person you want to meet with. And so we can not worry about, the bias that comes into here or the type of people who are talking, because if a veteran wants to talk to a veteran, this is your chance. If an international student wants to talk to an international student, this is your chance. And we emphasize that these admissions connections are 15 to 20 minutes, so they're quick, but they're the student's time. And so if you want to use that time to ask questions about what it's like to live in Austin, or you want to use that time to emphasize something on your resume, or want to use that time to ask about the other person and their career goals and their experience. Like that is your time to interview us, to interview the school and make sure it's a good mutual fit. So we really encourage students to use that time how they best see fit. One little change that we're exploring, and so I would ask that we don't type it on there because we're still exploring. We might get rid of the essay. And I'm sure we'll get to this eventually, but there are a lot of online platforms that can write essays for you these days. So we're exploring what is the best way to gather that information. So we might take what was the essay and add it as a video. So we're very familiar with technology and AI, and we're adapting our admissions process to just be aware of that. So we're exploring what the essay will look like, and we'll have more information hopefully shortly.
Yeah, that's a hot topic, chat GPT, et cetera. So very good, interesting. And you're big with the unveiling of, potential groundbreaking news
We
here.
save it for y'all. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And the only other thing I wanted to just mention is I noticed you have one letter of recommendation, and I think that was the same with Kenan-Flagler. So I would want candidates tuning in to be aware. Not every school has the same requirements there either. It tends to be either one or two, but I just want people to be aware of that because it's not always the same from school to school. Let's move on. We have some questions that actually came in from people who've attended these events or attending today. And so this first one I want to give to Allison at Fuqua, and this is about the resume. The truth is most people have some version of the resume they've been using out in the workforce, or at least a LinkedIn profile. But what adaptations should they consider before submitting it with their application?
Yeah, I think, it should be different. It should be different than when you're doing a job search. When you are doing a job search, you are putting out the resume and people are familiar with the work that you're doing with your industry, with your specific job function, most likely. So they're going to have a context already. I like to tell people, remember that the admissions committee is a diverse group. We have people who have their MBAs. We have people who have masters in other areas. We have people who've been in industry, who've been in different and working environments. So they're going to have a variety of backgrounds. So you want to make sure that what you are putting together is something that can be understood by anyone, regardless of their background. So you want to kind of focus it very intentionally on quantifiable achievements, and so that we can clearly see on the resume, as well as read what is on it, but see progression. See, have you moved up? Have you increased responsibilities? Have you increased the management of budget, people, and projects? That's what we're going to be looking for. It should be a professional one-page resume. Very, very seldomly in my 17 years at Fuqua have I seen someone that really needed more than one page who was applying to business school. It may require you to do some prioritization of what you're including, but it should be a one-page resume. So you've got limited real estate and you want to make good use of it. So you don't need to include a summary or a purpose. We know that your purpose is to get into business school. You can leave that off. The summary is your entire application, so we don't need that either. But you do also want to keep in mind, as we've talked about, that resume is going to be used most of the time in your interview, either with or without the context of the rest of your application. So it really should be a snapshot that represents your career progression, your education, and if you have room, a little bit of some of your interests or activities. If you have something you've been involved with in your community that has been very important to you and has helped you develop skills that will be applicable in the MBA program and in your post-MBA career, you should include that. Internships, unless you have a limited number of years of work experience, are probably less relevant. We're going to be looking for that full-time work experience. And you definitely should not include anything that you're doing in high school. We're going to be looking from college and on. So I think those are some of the important things. And then I would say the actual format is important, because we are looking at lots of resumes. And so if you come in with something that is very different and I'm not sure what section is supposed to mean what, that may not be to your benefit. So make sure that it have it very clearly laid out: work experience, education, extracurricular interests, whatever order you may want to choose there that works for you. But keep in mind that the person reading it may or may not know exactly what you've been doing. So a lot of jargon is probably not terribly helpful. That's why the chief difference between a job search resume. And then the other thing that I would advise, if we've got anybody here from the military, I know all of the schools here are near some pretty major military bases. You don't need to translate your military job titles. We're all pretty familiar with it. If you tell me project manager, I'm going to be confused if you actually meant company commander. So there are things like that. And then I would say the last thing, and this goes really to all aspects of your application, but you really want to double check for accuracy, particularly on dates. I can tell you how many times I have looked at somebody's work experience that they entered in the form and then looked at the resume and the dates don't match. And now I'm trying to figure out if it was a typo or did you have a year that you were unemployed that you're trying to hide. So just you want it to be accurate and you want it to be truthful, and your best bet through any part in this application, if you had a period of unemployment, a layoff, something like that, is to be upfront with it. Those things happen. We get it. You're going to have the opportunity to explain it, but make sure that those dates, one, are accurate and two, are consistent for your application.
Wow, lots of great tidbits there. I do want to underline one thing you said, and this is like something I probably say every year that we do these events, and that is that I feel like you never want to make the admissions reader have to play detective. Where it's like you just said, where the dates don't match up, and it's important for folks joining us to know that, some schools do background checks for people they admit randomly or for the entire class. I mean, it depends on the program. And so in those background checks, stuff has to line up, right? So important to get it all right and accurately on paper. So great advice. Appreciate that, Allison. I guess we have another question here that I wanted to move on to, which is about interviews. And Kathleen, we're going to have you tackle this one. And so, I mean, it's a pretty simple question, but it's sort of like, what do you learn in an interview that you couldn't get from the written application alone?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a great way to think about how we use the interview in our overall application review in combination with all those other components. So we are looking at, the resume, the essays, the interview, the recommendations, all these different components are ways that we're gathering, hopefully corroborating positive evidence that you're going to be a successful MBA student. But the interview specifically is kind of your chance to help us learn about you. And I like to say learn from you as well. One of my favorite parts about the interview is learning what you've done and what you know that I don't know and that I've never done and that sort of thing. Things I've learned in interviews about Internet of Things or about, stuff that that you've done and your experience that you're bringing to your classroom and to your classmates, you're bringing that to the community as well. So demonstrating that in the interview conversation is a great way to think about what you're bringing. We're assessing what you're bringing to the classroom and to the community. So one way to prepare for the interview, of course, is checking if the interviewer will have reviewed your entire application or just your resume. We do blind dish interviews and we've reviewed your resume specifically, but not the rest of your application. And then look at what you wish you could have included in your application. I know one of the biggest frustration points is the word limit on the essays. So there's not a word limit in the interview. There is a time limit, of course. I don't want to de-emphasize that. You don't want to go overboard with your introduction and your resume review. You really do need to be able to deliver that concisely. But what would you like to highlight that we didn't ask you about? Or what would you have talked about more in your essays had you had more word room to do that? So typically the interview is going to focus on your work, why you want the MBA, your goals, and how we are assessing you, or what we're assessing you is really kind of, are you going to meet the expectations of the job of being an MBA student and then MBA graduate? So prepare for it like a job interview, but the job has a pretty broad job description, and we'll get to admit a lot of people as opposed to just one or two people that we might hire for a position. So don't worry about what other people are saying in their interviews, just focus on you and your story, and what you're sharing, what you want to share with your interviewer, and also, of course, asking questions at the end of that. But in the sense, I think, look at the essay questions that we've asked you. That will tell you a lot about what's important to the school. Also think about what, as I said, more able to share in the essays that you would like to highlight in the interview conversation. And that will help kind of round out your application overall. And so that's what I would suggest.
Okay. Yeah. One thing that you've just mentioned that I think is really excellent advice is this idea of, when you sit down with someone, you have this interview, there is a temptation at the beginning when someone says, well, tell me a little bit about yourself or walk me through your resume, to kind of go through the entire sort of song and dance. And suddenly you're 10 minutes into the interview, maybe you're rambling a bit and you've missed out on an opportunity for more of a back and forth conversation. So I think you gave a great piece of advice when you mentioned give a concise summary of your background when someone asks you that question, and then know that they're going to dip in and find other things that they want to maybe get more detail on. And this is why I always say, I mean, it's really important to practice. I always think, get a parent or loved one or friend or anyone that's like willing to listen to practice with you when you're getting ready for an interview, because it's one thing to kind of think about how you would answer a question, but it's another thing to actually get to it and start answering and hearing kind of how you sound. So appreciate you kind of underlining these things, Kathleen.
Sure. And one other thing I'll just add, just that, as you walk through your resume, of course, we can see the job and the title that you had, but think about what's the blank space in between those positions. What was that transition? Was it something you sought out? Were you recruited to that? What were your decision processes between positions as well? That's something to include in your
Yeah.
interview that's not on your resume.
Great advice, like the whys behind all of this stuff that's on the resume. All right, so Lika, let's move on to you. We have another question, which is about career goals. So I think even though most people joining us are just maybe embarking on the admissions process, most people know that a lot of schools ask, like, what do you want to do after business school? And so I think there's often questions around like, how specific do people need to be? Is it like industry, position, specific company names, and how kind of much of a pivot can people indicate they want to do? Like, how closely does the career plan going forward need to somehow align with the candidate's prior experience? So, yeah, what are your thoughts on this, Lika?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, certainly, if you're pursuing graduate business education, likely you have some sort of goals in mind for the future. And I think something that I consider and a lot of schools are considering is that we want to make sure that we have the resources and the opportunities that you are seeking. There's a lot of really great business schools out there, and different schools are going to have different opportunities for you. So I do think that it's helpful to be specific in what you want to do, what your short-term goals are. It doesn't necessarily have to say, okay, I want this role at this company. I'm going to be there for 3 years, then I'm going to be promoted over here. We don't expect you to know what you're doing 10 years down the line, but having some specificity in your goals is helpful as we're trying to envision you in the class. But with a healthy level of flexibility, I know specifically we ask about backup plans or alternative goals, plan Bs, things like that, because I'm sure we've all had goals, directions, and somehow along the road, it takes like a left turn for whatever reason. So being able to exhibit some of that flexibility is really helpful as well. So I would say that your goals should be clear and well-defined and provide insight into why you're pursuing an MBA. This is a big commitment. It's an investment monetarily, time-wise. And so we really want to make sure that this particular MBA program is going to be the right one for you. As I said, I mean, there's 4 of us here today and hundreds of other business schools out there. As far as career goals aligning with previous experience goes, in some ways that's more relevant depending on the industry, but the majority of MBA seekers, and specifically full-time MBA seekers, are looking to make a pivot, right? If you are totally satisfied in what it is that you're doing, the full-time MBA may not be necessary in some cases. And so I would say that most people are making a pivot, whether it's functionally or completely changing industries. I know that we've had public school teachers go into consulting. We've seen dentists go into corporate finance. So there are some really major pivots that can be made in a full-time MBA. Again, in some cases, the relevant experience may be helpful in recruiting. So I'm thinking specifically of something like investment banking or having a background in finance may be helpful in that internship and full-time role seeking process. But I don't think anything is explicitly off limits. So I guess to summarize this part, yes to some specificity, but don't overwhelm yourself in thinking where you want to be in 5-10 years. I think really just providing your authentic reasons for why you're pursuing business school, why an MBA is the right next step for you, and then why the school that you're applying to is the place for you to do that. Maybe being specific about some of the particular opportunities at that institution that have led you to applying to that program, and really, showcasing that you've done your research, and you know that this is the right next step for you.
Yeah, well said. I think, this issue around goals, it is something that, I mean, candidates quickly become aware of when they begin applying to business school. But as you said, like, why would you be getting an MBA if you didn't have some plan, or some sort of goal in mind? So it makes sense. I think one of the things that you mentioned as well is this idea of a plan B or being flexible. And I feel like, I know that you all asked that at Kenan-Flagler, but I think you're not alone. I feel like there are several schools that ask about, okay, what if, and sometimes it's in the interview, sometimes it's in an essay or a short answer, but like that idea of like, well, what would you do if you couldn't become a consultant? What would be your plan B? So I think it is important. I will say the exercise of going through this sort of thought process to think about, okay, what might I do after business school? What kind of a job am I going to have? Which companies, et cetera, is really useful for when you eventually do arrive at business school, and kind of, it just helps you to sort of hit the ground running. And even if you pivot or change your mind, you'll know what that process is all about, and you'll be that much better at kind of figuring out how one goes about coming up with a set of goals and doing that research. So in any event, I know this is a really important piece of the admissions puzzle, so appreciate you shedding light on it. Patrick, let's go to you. We have one more question, I think, from kind of these audience sourced questions, and this is about essay writing. Of course, I didn't know you were going to say that you guys might not have an essay, but either way, essay writing can be daunting. I mean, you guys for many years have had this great essay. I believe you had it last year about, picturing yourself at graduation, right? And so I don't know what your advice would be for someone who's just, either beginning to think about how to answer some of these essay questions, or maybe, if it's going to be a video thing, like how do you just start the brainstorming for these things?
Yeah, I think either way, essays or videos, all of us are trying to get to the same thing and just learn more about you. And so I think essays, you'll see you're going to find the prompts being more focused on personal questions and personal information, because AI can't answer that for you. Allison was talking about the 25 things, like AI can't write that. And so I think you're going to see more and more schools going in that direction. And so I would lean into it, be your authentic self. You have the rest, your application and your resume can show us your ability to handle business school, can show us your accomplishments. There's other ways for you to demonstrate you understand the school's values. The essay, in my opinion, is really your chance to tell the school more about you. And so whether that's through writing and through a video, be personal, be vulnerable, be honest, be transparent. And, to I think Allison's point, like this is also a good place for you to fill in any gaps. So if you have a gap on your resume, sometimes the essay is a good chance to explain that. We do have an optional statement that we're not planning on getting rid of. And the optional statement is your opportunity. If there's a gap on your resume, or if you were laid off, or it took you longer than the traditional amount of time to earn a degree, like those are all good places, an opportunity for you to explain yourself. But my advice for the people is just to be yourself, and be personal, because especially in this world where it's really easy to get an AI to write it. I can't tell you how many times our dean has typed in our essay response into AI and sent it out to us, just to show us like what we're working with, and it's not that far off from the kind of things we were receiving. So again, just be yourself.
Might be better.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, this is a really interesting idea that's maybe even bigger than this panel, this idea of, AI proofing questions, and so I think, Allison, you were talking about the 25 things at Duke. I mean, that's a great point, Patrick, that you're underlining there, which is that's really personal stuff and harder to, just kind of dash off whether you're a bot or anyone else. So, yeah, we'll see how that kind of, comes in the forum as all of you are kind of making plans for the individual breakouts. We have some fun questions that I wanted to test out here. So let's see the first one, and we'll just go back through the group here. So Allison, we'll do these kind of rapid fire. I want you to describe your admissions team in 3 words.
Yeah, I think I would choose curious. I really enjoy getting to know people and their different backgrounds. Empathetic, I think we spend a lot of time kind of putting ourselves in your shoes and figuring out the choices that you've made and how you've gotten there. And then I would say committed to the ideals of Fuqua and Team Fuqua and the authenticity of the application process.
Excellent. All right, Kathleen, how about at Goizueta?
I would say passionate about education, certainly, and the programs and the students. Stressed, honestly. There's never enough time to do everything. We would love to spend more time with every single student. And then hilarious. We have a lot of fun and really, I wish y'all could see our meetings. We have a really good time with what we do and with each other and with y'all too.
Excellent. Yeah. And I think, you say stressed. I would say one of the amazing things about business school admissions is how holistic it is, which we don't see in a lot of other academic disciplines. And so I think if you all are stressed, it's because you guys are putting in serious time to assess candidates and to get to know everyone in a really thorough fashion, which is what I love about MBA admissions. All right. So Lika, how about you? 3 words for the admissions team at Kenan-Flagler.
I would say supportive, knowledgeable. I mean, I think between the full-time team, we have like 3+ decades of business school experience, and reliable. I think that there's a healthy level of transparency in our process.
Excellent. Patrick, how about you?
Yeah, I'll start with fun. I think we really enjoy our jobs. We really enjoy meeting with students, and anytime we're together, whether it's just us or with our students, we're having fun. We're collaborative. We all bring strengths to the table, and some are better at writing reports and some are better at mingling and small talk, and we work well together. And we're creative. We're trying to think differently about the process and how we do things and just the MBA experience at large. So fun, collaborative, and creative.
All right, excellent. So Patrick, let's stay with you for this next lightning round question, which is about, I don't want to say mistakes, but sometimes people make mistakes in the application, right? They'll put in the wrong school name. It's like a classic mistake. Is there anything else like that you can think of, like something that you don't like to see when people are applying to McCombs?
This is a small one, but I would say just especially with, I think a lot of us, if not all of us, use videos. So being able to pronounce the school is important. Some of them are easier than others. I can only imagine Duke, the different versions they get. You would think McCombs would be easier. We get a lot of McCombs. So being able to pronounce your school is my lightning round answer for some cringy things. When we're watching those videos and they say McCombs, we're like, eee, and kind of back up a little bit.
Got it. Okay. That's a good one. Yeah, and I feel like this panel, we've got Fuqua, Goizueta, which I always have a little bit of trouble pronouncing, McCombs, which I hear people say McCombs, like it's, Kenan-Flagler's a little bit easier, but this is a good panel for that. So, all right, we're going to go backwards through the group here. So Lika, how about you? Some kind of a cringy mistake that you don't like to see?
Ooh, I guess something topical for me right now is folks who've like missed deadlines and they want some sort of exceptions made based on, things. Obviously, there's catastrophic circumstances that happen, but we get a lot of applications. And in order to be fair and consistent to all of our applicants, we don't really make exceptions to things like deadlines that have been posted for months. And so just being prepared in advance, I think, so you're not running into a situation where maybe you've missed your shot or your chance. So that's the topical thing that I thought of.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, just this idea that, you as a candidate are no more important than any other candidate. And sometimes I feel like people forget that and they feel like there should be afforded sort of extra time. So that's important to note. Okay, so Allison, how about you?
Yeah, I think first of all, Patrick, yes, the things that I hear for Fuqua can be downright offensive sometimes, but this is sort of the sister piece of using the wrong school's name. If there is a very specific program at a school and you use it for my essay, I would, if you're going to mention our women's group, I want you to know that we call it the Association of Women in Business and not something that another school uses. So it's not enough to just change the name of the school, but it's also you're calling out specific clubs or professors or classes to make sure that you get those right as well.
Okay. And I'm going to apologize to Kathleen because in my going backwards through the group, I'm terrible at it. Obviously, I should have just done it, forwards. But I apologize, I skipped you. So Kathleen, how about you? What's something that you don't like to see when people are applying?
Sure, I think there with all the virtual interviews that we're doing, I think one of the issues is going to be camera angles, internet connection, those sorts of things. Also being late to an interview, not being prepared for the interview. So, the interviews are by invitation, so really make the most of that time with the admissions committee members. And it's Goizueta, or you can say Emory. That is fine. We can take it.
Got it. There's actually, I don't know if everyone's seen it, but there's a really great video on YouTube that was, I think it's a little bit older, but it was put out by Emory, and it's all just sort of different people in the school pronouncing the name, and just how I think the point being that there are a lot of ways to pronounce it. It doesn't really matter. It's really all about the Emory experience, and yeah. So that's a fun video to watch. If you do have one more kind of fun question before we send you all off to the individual breakouts, what's something that's coming up on campus that you're looking forward to?
We're going to go back in reverse order. Orientation. We have the class coming in at the end of July at Fuqua, and that is when we get to meet everybody again, see them again, all the classes coming together, and really see the class of 2025 come together for the first time. So I'm super stoked for that.
Excellent. Okay, so Kathleen, how about you?
I'll cheat. Last week was one of my favorite weeks of the entire year. On Monday, we had onboarding for our full-time 1-year MBA students who just started. Wednesday and Thursday were massive presentation days for end of the semester. We got in 300 alumni coming to campus as judges. And then Friday was graduation. So last week is kind of our insane, really fun, everything happening all at once week. And then we get to do it again for 2-year onboarding and later in the summer. So
Excellent. Lika, how about you?
I can't think of anything more opposite than than the admissions process, but graduation. So graduation for UNC at large is this weekend, but the MBA or Kenan-Flagler Business School graduation is next Saturday. And so that's just such a fun full circle moment for all of these people that have put all this work into their applications, all this work into their time in the program, and they get to celebrate at graduation.
Excellent. Patrick?
I'm going to go a little bit of a different direction, but it's not happening on campus. But myself and my team, we're looking forward to hitting the road this summer and getting to meet some people. And so between myself and my whole team, we'll be going to Mexico, India, South America, Africa, and major cities across the United States. So we're looking to meeting you where you are, applicants, and having conversations and being able to guide you in this process. So we're excited to meet some applicants this summer.
Excellent. That sounds like fun. So at this stage, I want to thank our panelists. I also want to apologize. Apparently my internet's been a little weird for the last couple of minutes. So I hope everyone's still hearing me, but I wanted to thank Allison, Kathleen, Lika, and Patrick for taking part. I'm going to send you guys off so you can get into your individual Zooms and get ready for the onslaught of attendees who are going to come and join you with questions. But I really wanted to thank you all for all your time today. It's been a real pleasure hosting you. So as our panelists disappear and get off into their individual Zooms, I wanted everyone to stay here for just a minute. We want to give them some time to get set up so that they can log in and just be ready for your questions. And while we do that, I just had a couple of kind of admissions tips, since most of you are kind of just embarking on this process. So what we decided to do this time is come up with some myths and to kind of debunk them for you. And again, we're going to give you the breakout room links in a second. We'll put them in the chat here. You also will get an email with the links, and you can go from one school to another. You can only be in one school's breakout at a time, but you can, ask a question in one room and then go over to another and get that question answered. I think that the schools typically stick around for around a half an hour, so you should have plenty of time. In any event, while we're letting them get set up, I wanted to just mention that as we kind of mentioned earlier in the session, that it's totally false to think that admissions officers just look at your test scores and grades or how many years of work experience you have, and then don't read the file if you like don't meet their standards. That's not something that's happening. They really are reading everything for every candidate. And again, MBA admissions is unique in that regard. There are many other types of academic disciplines where that does not happen. So you should feel fortunate that you are afforded that kind of holistic review. The next thing, I don't know why, but people often think that people are invited to interview or admitted to programs in like alphabetical order, and that, if someone with a last name that begins with R is accepted to a school and your last name begins with D and you haven't heard, that somehow you're out of the running. Nothing could be further from the truth. The schools are they're actually not that organized in this respect. There are many readers on the committee. They all divvy up applications. And so obviously things don't always come back at the same time. So don't get caught up in some of the stuff that you see on Reddit or other places. The next one is, we've got one that says, if you're rejected from business school, don't bother reapplying. Nothing can be further from the truth. Reapplicants in the business school, we've asked schools about this, and they say it's mostly because it shows dedication. And most people, if they're rejected, will go back to the drawing board, figure out maybe what was wrong and address it. And so it's absolutely worth reapplying to business school if you've been rejected and you want another shot at it. The only thing I would say, as someone who I used to read applications at Wharton when I was an admissions officer there, don't submit the exact same application. Like, you need to show that you've grown and are addressing weaknesses that may have landed you that rejection the first time. And then the final myth we want to bust today is that the interview is this final phase of the admissions process and totally determines your fate. A lot of people think that because the interview comes afterwards, when you're invited to an interview or something, that it can be like the final factor. And it's not really. Most schools that have an interview by invitation will still do a review of your entire file with the notes from the interview in making their final decision. So don't get carried away in thinking that, oh, if the interview doesn't go perfectly, I'm rejected. That's not really how this works. So anyway, hopefully these are helpful. Obviously, we wanted to give the schools some time to get set up. What you can do now is we're going to share in the chat as well as via email the links. Each school has its own Zoom link. Here they are. They just come up on screen. I recommend that you copy and paste them somewhere because once you leave this Zoom, you won't have them anymore in the chat, and you'll only have them in your email. So I want to thank everyone sincerely for taking part today. It's always a pleasure to just hear from so many candidates popping into the room. I love it when everyone announces where they're from. So thank you so much for joining us today. We're doing this all next week and the week after. We have a great batch of schools to round out the rest of this month. So yeah, thanks for attending. Really appreciate your time. I know that you guys have a lot of things you could be doing. So enjoy your time now with the schools as you hop into the Zoom breakouts, and we will see you all next week.